Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Dan from DHTV, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use the iPhone 12 mini camera with some tips, tricks, and the full settings so that you can take the best photos for yourself. As always, there's a link in the description to more great iPhone 12 mini tutorials, so if you want to learn more, check it out. Let's get started. Now we're going to start off with the basics to the iPhone 12 mini camera and work our way up to the more advanced features. So I've placed some chapters and timestamps in the description, so if you want to skip ahead to exactly what you want to learn, you can use those timestamps and skip ahead. So like I said, we're going to start off with the basics. So opening the camera app. Now there's a few ways you can do that. The simplest is to just find the camera app, tap, and open it. You can also use the control center. So if you pull down from the right, there's a camera app option right here. You can tap that, it'll open as well. And lastly, if the phone is locked and you just tap to wake it, you have a camera option at the bottom right. You can just tap on that, tap and hold and let go. It'll open up the camera app as well. So it's totally up to you. Just keep in mind, if you do it from the lock screen, you will have to unlock the phone to make any edits or to actually change or delete any photos after you've taken them. Now, starting with the basics here, we've got photos. That's where the camera app traditionally opens when you first open it up. To navigate, you just scroll left and right, and we're going to go through all these options in a little bit, but we're going to start with photos. Now, to take a photo, it's as simple as just tapping on the screen of what you want to focus in on, and then just tapping on this circle here, which is your shutter button, and the photo's taken. Anytime you take a photo, you'll get a preview at the bottom left. You can always tap on that. It'll open it up. You can tap on it to see the picture without any of the options beside it. If you tap on it again, the options will return. And within these options, you can be taken back to all your photos. You can share it using the share button at the bottom left. And this will allow you to share it with your contacts, so text messaging, iMessage, email, and even AirDrop. The little heart is just to add a favorite to your photo. So if you tap the heart, it'll light up and that'll be like a favorite that's in your albums. You can tap edit, which gives you all of the edit options, but you can use the auto. So it's going to automatically enhance the photo, or you can suggest what you'd like here by going through all of these and then tapping on one and using this little bar here to sort of enhance or change up the photo the way you'd like it. You also have options at the bottom here. So the first one is live. I'll explain that in a bit. The second one here is what we're at right now. This one is the filters. So if you want to add filters to your photo, you can. And then resizing options right here. Now resizing is pretty important. You can see at the top, this one right here. It allows you to set the photo to an exact size. So if you wanted to take a photo and you wanted it to be an 8x10, you can tap 8x10. It'll resize it for you. And you can actually move it around, zoom in, and just make that 8x10 exactly what you want. This is great if you're going to print out these photos. That way you know exactly the size to print out. When you're done editing, you just tap done and the photo is saved there. We'll tap the back button to go back to our photo section. Now there are a few options when you take photos. We're going to get one of our co-hosts here to be the center of attention here. If you want to focus in on something, like I said, you tap, but after you tap, so let's say we tap on that focused option in the back to the duck. If you move the camera around, the autofocus will automatically bring the square back to the center. So that means that now you're focused back in on the main duck here. So if you want to lock it in on a certain area, so for example, that duck, you want to tap and hold. Okay, and that's going to give you the AEAF lock at the top. That means that the autofocus is locked, and then you can set the exposure, and now everything is set. If we move the camera around, you'll see it stays locked in that position. You can take your photo just like you would normally, and to remove the autofocus lock, you just tap anywhere and it's back to normal. Now the shutter button at the bottom can also do a few things. If you swipe to the right, you can take a quick video, so you can see it started recording a video here. You can take a picture while you're in the video by tapping. You can also tap stop, and the video is also saved on the bottom left there so you can view it. If you swipe to the left on the shutter button like so, it'll start taking burst photos. Now burst photos just takes a whole bunch of photos simultaneously, and you can see if we tap on our preview, it's taken 12 photos in a matter of a second. So if you wanted to use that, you could. And then to bring up specific options for your photo, you can see an arrow at the top. And if we tap the arrow, that's where all of our options are. Now you'll see at the top we had this option and this option. This one is the flash, and this one here is the live photo. You'll notice the bottom, we have this. This actually flips the camera to the front-facing camera so that you can use all those features there as well. But let's go through these options first, and the first one is the flash. And the best way to take photos is obviously to set these up first if you have the time, otherwise the auto options are pretty good anyway. We'll tap the first option so you can set the flash to auto, on or off. If you turn it on and you take your photo, you can see it takes it with the flash. You can always use the options up here. When you set one here, usually they appear at the top. You can turn them off or set them back to their original, which in this case is auto. I usually leave the flash on auto anyway. The second option is live, and this is for the live photos. Live photo auto is on right now. You can set it to on or off. I'll show you how live photos work. Any movement that's going on in the photo, it's going to capture about a second before and after. So if I drop this as I take the photo and I preview it, if I hold my finger on the actual preview, you get a little bit after and a little bit before, as well as some audio. So what that does is when you tap edit and then you tap the live option here, you can actually set the photo, the keyframe, to exactly where you want it. And that way you have the perfect photo every time. And this is great if someone's blinking, you can just navigate to the point where they're not blinking, and then you get that portion. You can tap make keyframe and that's your photo now, so you never miss the moment. So it's good to have it on. Just make sure that if you are sending these things, these live photos to people, that when you do send it, so for example, when you go to the share option, tap that live to turn it off. Otherwise, if they have an iPhone, they'll be able to see and hear what you're doing in that little photo for a second before and after. And you don't want to be embarrassed if you say or you're doing something that you didn't realize was there. We'll tap the arrow to go back. We'll set up our little host here. We'll tap the live again. Live auto is supposedly going to use the technology in the phone to decide when it's best to use that live photo. But most of the time it uses it on every photo. Otherwise, just turn it off. The next option is the size. So right now we're set to the 4:3 option. You can change it to a square, so for like Instagram photos or square photos, and it goes to a 1:1. You can also set it to 16:9, so that way you have a larger screen real estate to take photos with. But we're just going to leave it on the 4:3 for now. The next option here is the exposure. Once again, this time you can actually brighten the exposure or darken it up like this. And even if you tap to focus, if you set the exposure down here, it's still going to save it on screen unless you change it back using these options. So you can take your photo like normal. Looks kind of cool with the lighting in the darkness like this though, but we'll put it back to the standard 00. So exposure is available to you down there. The timer, so you can set a 3-second or a 10-second timer. So if you have a bunch of people in a photo, so you can take that photo, you'll see 3, 2, 1 at the bottom right. It'll take the photo. You'll also see up top, anytime you enable any of these features here, that it will kind of give you an idea of what you've been doing up top, so you can quickly disable them. So if we tap on the timer here, it'll open it back up. We can turn it off. If we tap on the exposure up here as well, we can reset it back to the 0 if we'd like. So just a quick tip there as well. The last option here is this one, and this is going to give you the live filters. So just like I showed you when you're editing, you can choose a filter and take the photo using that filter. Some cool ones here, and that's the way it'll save. And you'll also see that option up top here. So you can always click on it or tap on it and then just go back to normal. All right, so that's photos. Now we can tap on the arrow at the top here and go back down to our main settings. We'll swipe to the left to bring up portrait mode. This is one of the most popular features with iPhones these days. And I've changed the setup here. We've got our subject now on a little platform. You can see at the top it does say move further away, but I'll still be able to show you how it works for the most part. So you want to tap on the subject to focus in on it, and the background should blur, and then you can take your photo. Now you can also control the blur right here. If you tap that little F, that's the depth of field control. So you can actually blur the background a lot by swiping to the right, making it a lower number, or making the number as high as possible and taking out most of the blur altogether. By default, it's in the middle, so you'll have 2.8. So let's just make it a full blur just so you can see it a little better here. So again, we've got our subject. We just take our photo, Give it a second. In our preview, we can see how it'll look. Looks pretty good. And if we tap edit, we can modify this right from this stage here. So we have portrait at the top. We can turn that off completely. We also have our lighting effects, and you can edit these right here. So natural is what we took it with. We have studio, we have contour, we have stage light, which looks pretty cool. Stage light mono, and the high key light. Now in all of these lighting effects here, you can also modify how bright or how dark it's going to have that lighting effect. So you can use that option down there. And like I said earlier, or like I showed you on the main page, if you tap on that little F option here for the depth of field, you can actually modify it right here as well. So you can add or decrease the amount of blur. And when you're done, just tap done at the bottom. And we can go back to our main page. Now you can take the photo in any one of those lighting effects as well with portrait mode. Just for my distance, I have a little bit of a lack of movement here, so I'm not close enough to really take it at the best angle, but I can also flip to the front facing camera and use the portrait mode options here. It's a little bit messed up because I got a camera and everything going on here, but I can control all those options as well. I can change all the lighting effects as well. Looks pretty cool. And it's something that a lot of people really like, and now with the front facing camera having that ability as well, you can use that on the front with all the options that pretty much we showed you in the photo section as well. And those options are the flash, exposure, timer, your filters, and then you've got your lighting, and then your depth of field controls. So just like when you take a photo, you want to tap to focus in, you can tap to lock the focus, right? And you can also play around with the exposure. When you play around with the exposure, it kind of screws up the lighting a little bit with some of these. So if you're using these, really balance out that exposure a little bit more carefully. We'll tap the arrow up top again. And let's go to the pano option. Now this is a panoramic photo, and this is pretty cool because it's going to allow you to grab everything that's in the shot. So you have this line that you can drag across for a pretty long period of time, and it'll grab everything in that photo. So right now you can see, we can see this duck right here, and you can see barely the iPhone box right there. So if we turn this and we want to grab, let's say we wanted to grab that much, and we're just going to turn this, we're going to basically just turn this like this. We're going to grab all of this real estate in there. So we'll press and just kind of turn it. And you want to do this slowly and you want to try to not hesitate or fumble around because it really could make the photo look weird. But that's pretty much it there. And if we tap on it now, you can see I grabbed all of that real estate in the photo. It looks really cool, and if you're creative with this, you can get really nice skylines or lakefront views and things like that. It looks really cool, and it allows you to grab a lot of real estate in your photo. Now in the panoramic mode here, you have your option to use the zoomed out lens as well, so you can get even more in the photo. But other than that, you're pretty much limited to just those options with your focusing as well. So let's swipe to the right and we'll take a look at video, which is a very popular feature. Now you're probably noticing that it's really overexposed in this video option here. I'm going to lower the brightness on my screen, but that's due to the HDR video effects that are in play here right now. So if you want to remove that, I'll explain that in the settings option that we'll go through in a bit. Taking a video is pretty much like taking a photo. You're just going to tap to focus or tap and hold to lock your focus in on what you want to focus on. And then you're just going to tap the shutter button right here. It's going to take your video. You can take a photo by tapping that shutter button. You can zoom in or out while you're in video if you'd like. And whenever you're ready, you can tap stop. It'll stop the video and save it in the bottom left. Now at the top, you have the options to set the quality of the video. Now by default, it's set to 1080p at 30 frames per second. You can tap on the HD there. It'll push it all the way up to 4K. 4K, you have the option to go all the way up to 60 frames per second. See it darkened up. You don't get that HDR video effect anymore because you're limited on the iPhone 12 mini to 4K at 30 frames per second with that HDR capability. So usually for me, I leave it at the 1080p at 30 or 60 just because the size of the videos are just too big sometimes, especially with the mini. If you got the base model, you only have 64 gigabytes of space. But you can take advantage of all those options if you'd like as well, and I'll go over them a little bit later in the settings Now up here you have flash options. If you tap on the flash, you can turn it off. You can also just swipe up at any time to bring up these options down here. So that'll allow you to access the exposure. So you can set the exposure for your video as well. And then just tap on the option to remove it. So that's video. So let's swipe to the slow motion feature here, and I'm gonna bring the brightness back up a little bit. Now from here, we pretty much have the same options as we did in the video section, but you can modify the speed here. So we've got it at 240. We can switch it to 120, which will be a little bit faster. The best or the slowest you can get is 240 here. And we'll just do a demonstration. So we'll drop a couple of these ducks down here. We'll just tap to focus. We want it there. We'll start our video and then I'll throw the ducks. We'll stop it. And we can tap the preview. Okay, and you get that slow motion. Now you notice that the slow motion, it didn't really show where I wanted it, so I could always edit, and you have your slow motion editing options at the bottom. So if I wanted the slow motion to start right at the beginning and stop here, I could do that, and then I can play it to view it. See, and I can slow it down exactly where I want as well. So that's really good that you have that option there, and then it'll speed up when it hits that line. Tap done when you're ready, and you can go back to your slow motion options. You also can tap to focus. You have your zooming effects as well. And the last option is time lapse. This is something where you would leave your camera on for an allotted period of time, let's say an hour, facing cars, a street, water, the sky, and it's going to speed that up and turn the video into like a 1 minute or 2 minute time-lapse video. And you can really take long videos like this or short videos, but you're just going to press on it and it's just going to keep going around and around and around. And then when you stop it and preview it after an hour, it'll be a lot faster and speed up the effect. Now let's quickly go over the front-facing camera. So if we flip to the front, we're on time-lapse to start. So you can use time-lapse here as well. Tap to focus, use your exposure options here. You have an arrow at the top to bring up the exposure options as well. We'll move to slow motion. Works very similar, except this time you only have the HD at 120. You don't have the 240 option. Video, you can shoot at 4K at 60 frames per second, HD at 60. You can go to 30, you can go to 24, I believe, on 4K for whatever reason. I've never used that. But keep in mind, you're not going to have the HDR effects. The front-facing camera is nowhere near as good as the rear cameras. Photos, pretty much all the options you had on the front, you'll have on the back, except you only have a small zoom out effect, which I don't really use either. Now, one thing that is new with the front-facing camera is this right here. You can see that little option. If you ever see that on the front or on the rear, that is night mode. Now, when you see this night mode option, let's just bring up our extra options at the bottom. This one right here, you can actually control it. So it's off right now, but we can turn it auto or to give it max light. Now, if we take the photo, you can see it has that fade effect. You want to let that fade effect go through. It's a really good feature. I find that it works really well. If it gets annoying, just turn it off completely. But you'll also notice this feature appear on the rear-facing camera whenever it justifies that it needs night mode. You can see how it keeps appearing when I make it darker on the lens. So it's an automatic feature that you can control when it appears. Moving to portrait, same thing. We talked about this. You have all your portrait lighting modes. Pretty much works the same as the rear camera. And the panoramic photo, you do not get to use that on the front-facing camera. It'll just automatically flip you back to the rear-facing camera. Now, just a few tips here. You can take photos also by holding the camera like this. This is the landscape mode. When you take photos like this, it's portrait position. You can use the buttons at the top here to take your photo. If you hold on that button, it'll take a quick video. So if you're in your photo mode, let's say by default, you can take a quick video by holding. When you let go, it'll stop. So that's an option there. And with that, let's move on to the settings section here. So we'll just unlock the phone here, go back to our main page, tap on settings. And we want to find the camera app here. So the camera options. And this is where all the settings are going to take place. So if you do want to modify it or set it up beforehand, it's always a good idea. The first one is formats. There's two, high efficiency and most compatible. Now, if you want to reduce the file size of your photos and videos, the high efficiency mode is going to be the best option. It does save it in this HEIF format. It's not a standard format, so it's not going to be as compatible with certain devices. I find that if I use this mode right here, sometimes when I upload them to my computer, they take a really long time because they need to convert. But it's going to give you the ability to use the best options with these cameras, so it might be a good idea to keep it on. If you do choose the most compatible mode, it's going to save it as a JPEG file, which a lot of us know. It's totally up to you. I'm going to put it back to high efficiency just for this video, but I do tend to use the most compatible mostly. The next option is record video, and if you open this up, you can see all the different formats that you can record. By default, it's set to 1080 at 30 frames per second. You can set it to where you want it to default to. You can always modify that with those quick settings I showed you in the video options, but you can see how much space each option is going to take up. So you could set it to wherever you'd like here. Obviously, 4K at 60 FPS is going to use the most space for your videos. I find that the 1080 options are somewhat in the middle, and that's where I traditionally leave the defaults. HDR video, this is going to allow you to record up to 30 frames per second in 10-bit high dynamic range, including Dolby Vision. So if you want to have that on, keep it enabled. Also, if you turn this off, you won't have that highly saturated sort of look on the video. It's not necessarily like that when you record it and finish. It's just sometimes if you try to upload these kind of videos to Instagram or other sites, if they can't handle it, it's going to look bad. So you might want to turn that off if it's causing problems. Auto FPS, auto 30 FPS, so automatically reduce the frame rate to improve low light video to optimize file size. So you have some options in here. Auto 30 and 60, auto 30 are off. You can choose what you'd like to use there. And then lock the camera, which I don't really know why you would want to lock it to one lens. But basically, while you're recording the video, this camera is actually switching between different cameras. If you lock it, it's not going to automatically switch between the cameras while you're recording. So totally up to you. Play around with these settings. This is how I usually keep them, exactly as it is like this. Slow motion options here. So you can set it to default to the 1080 at 120 frames or 1080 at 240. You can see the estimations here on how much space it's going to use on your phone for a 1-minute video. So obviously the 240 is using a lot more. But again, 1 minute of slow motion is usually more than enough to capture that moment, and it's only going to take up 480 megabytes. So totally up to you. I leave this one on 240 just to get the better effect. Record stereo sound. Leave this on there, unless there's a specific reason why you don't want stereo sound to be recorded. It just sounds a lot better. Preserve settings. What this option lets you do is preserve the last mode you're in, such as video or portrait mode, because it's automatically going to default back to photos if you don't have that on. So turning that on lets you always keep the last mode you use. Same with the creative controls, exposure adjustment, and the live photos, so if it's on, off, or auto. So you can set those up, and that way when you open the camera app, the last options you used, it'll be there. Use volume up for burst. So when you turn this on, now when you hold the camera like this in your camera app and you press that button up top, it's going to take a burst photo rather than that video that I showed you just a little while ago. So again, that's totally up to you. If you set the volume up to burst, the volume down rocker will still be able to be used as the quick video. So it's a good idea to turn it on just to get more functionality out of the phone. Scan QR codes. This will allow you to use the camera to scan the QR code and then open the website. The grid. Now I turn this on. I use it for a different reason than what it's for. So when you open the app now, you'll see there's a grid across. The use for this is the rule of thirds. Rather than try to explain this, you could look up what the rule of thirds is. I use the grid just because I like to have the ability to really center my photo. And a lot of people give me a lot of grief over that when I say it, but it's personal preference, and that's what I like to use. So you can turn that on or off. Mirror the front camera. Huge setting here that everybody has missed or wanted, especially if you take selfies. So let's just go into our camera app. If we flip to the front-facing camera, so the mirror option is off by default. My hand is on the left side here. Take the photo. All of a sudden, I'm flipped to the right side. A lot of people don't like this with the selfies. So if we mirror the front camera, and now we go back into our camera, my hand's on the left, I take my photo, my hand's on the left. It took Apple forever to bring this feature, and it's here now, and you can set it. You need iOS 14 and a later version of an iPhone for this to work. If you got an iPhone 12 mini, the mirror front camera feature is there for you. You can set it up if you'd like. Now, this next option, which is view outside the frame, another option I didn't really know how it worked. If we open our camera app, what I thought was that when you zoomed in a little bit here, you can see what's outside of the screen a little bit. I thought that when you took the photo, you could edit and then crop and bring that back. But what was explained in the comments of my previous camera video is that it's more or less to frame your photo a little bit so you can kind of see what's outside of the frame, and you can bring it in if you wanted or take it out. I hope that's what it's for. Let me know again in the comments. I had to read a lot of them and still kind of unsure. Like, I mean, so you can see right here, some of the monitor is in screen. I guess by knowing that I don't have the monitor in screen, I can kind of lift it up. I don't know. It's to me, it's odd because our eyes should be able to see what was outside of it as well. I'm not 100%, but that's what was explained in the comments. We'll go back to our settings. You can turn that on or off. Scene detection. Okay, so scene detection is automatically improve the photos of various scenes using intelligent image recognition. You can test it on or off. I leave that on. Prioritize faster shooting. Another feature that's using the intelligence in this phone, and this one says that it's going to adapt the image quality when rapidly pressing the shutter button. You can try how that looks on or off yourself. Lens correction. This is going to correct the lens distortion on the front and ultra wide cameras. And then smart HDR. So that's that intelligently blending the best parts of different exposures into one single photo. So those are your options here. But this is the tutorial on how to use the iPhone 12 mini, tips and tricks. If you guys have any questions or need any help with anything, let me know in the comments. As always, there's a link in the description to the full playlist of iPhone 12, 12 Pro, and 12 mini videos so you can learn more. And if you want to help support the channel, there's a link in the description to the Patreon campaign. It really helps me out. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell notification box to be notified when I post new videos, and I'll see you in the next one.